Okay, the MCU in chronological order continues with the 8th entry into this series and the overall 8th movie in the MCU, Thor: The Dark World. Okay, let's waste no time, let's get right into it. So when you're watching these movies in chronological order, it makes more sense to watch Dark World after the Avengers, since it picks up where that movie leaves off with Loki being taken to Asgard to face judgment for his crimes. So chronologically, it makes more sense to put this on immediately after the Avengers, so that way you can get a continuation and follow-up to said story. Now, with all that out of the way, let's briefly go over, let's try to go over Thor: The Dark World as fast as possible, because at the end of the day, I really don't have a whole lot to say when it comes to Thor 2. I think compared to the first movie, this movie has some good things in it, and it has some not so good things in it. And yeah, this really is one of the weaker entries into the MCU as a whole. Things that I did like. The returning cast. I'm a fan of this cast. I like them a lot. No, Chris Hemsworth as the character of Thor. He is the character of Thor. He is never going to put in a bad performance if he tries. In this movie, Thor doesn't really go through much of a character arc per se. Pretty much whatever needed to be told was told in the first Thor movie. So now we just see Thor going on adventures and fighting, and pretty much contemplating as to whether or not he wants to take the throne of Asgard or not take the throne of Asgard. So basically, he's trying to find himself. He doesn't know if he wants to be a warrior or if he wants to be a king yet. But Chris Hemsworth's performance all throughout the film is actually really good. Even though Thor's journey in this movie is really nothing really to speak of, this is more of a low-key story than is a Thor story. Thor's story was mostly told his first movie, but now this movie more or less is centered around Loki, and this movie is more along the lines of Loki's redemption. Speaking of which, I think Tom Hiddleston in Thor: The Dark World put on his best performance as the character of Loki. In Hiddleston's third outing, he gave Loki much more depth in this performance. He gave Loki much more gravitas in this. This movie is about Loki's redemption. We see him do evil things in the first Thor movie, and we saw him lead an invasion in the Avengers. Now he's facing those crimes, and now he's on the road to redemption. And I think it was handled fairly decently. I like Loki in this movie. Like I said, I thought Tom Hiddleston put on a great performance. When he gets the news of his mother being killed by Malekith, you can see the instant rage that he feels, because out of everyone in his family, the only two people that really loved him were really Thor and his mom. With Odin, Odin does love his sons, but he's more harsh on them. While Frigga had more of that parental touch, and she was more or less the link that brought Loki and Thor together as children and as adults. So when she's murdered, I like the rage that Loki shows. It's very understated, but you can clearly see it. I like how he tries to hide it, but he can't hide it because he had a bond with his mom. And I like the fact that it was actually Frigga who was revealed to Frigga who taught Loki his tricks of the trade. So I like all that stuff. I like how Frigga, who was underutilized in that first Thor movie, I like how her character is pretty much used really well in the second Thor movie. Thor 1 was mostly Odin centered. This is more Frigga centered, Rene Russo, and she does get a lot. And Rene Russo does get a lot to shine in. And speaking of Rene Russo, I liked her as the character of Frigga. I liked her in the first movie, even though she didn't have that much to do. But in this one, she actually does have a little bit more to do. Like, she actually does get to have a chance to have some relationship growth with her sons and with Odin. I like the scene of her and Loki having a bonding moment together. Like, everyone despises Loki for what he did, but Frigga still has faith in her son. I like that stuff. And when she's killed by Malekith, it affects the whole story. And it puts Loki. His mother's death, the death of Frigga puts Loki on his quest to redemption. And I like it. It was handled fairly well. I mean, I would prefer Frigga and Malekith have a more extended fight scene instead of just like having like shing shing and then also she gets stabbed in the back. At least let her last for like a minute or two instead of 30 seconds. I mean, it's not like this movie's story is really captivating, because it ain't. All it has to go based off his action sequences. You could at least given her some more time to shine. Yeah, I would prefer Renee Russo just get a little bit more time in terms of her action sequences. But overall, I do like how she was utilized, and I like how the death of her character is pretty much the uniting force in having the brothers go on their course of redemption with each other. So that was cool. I like Natalie Portman as Jane Foster. No, she's okay. She wasn't really all that great in the first one, and she's not all that different in this one. Her and Hemsworth do have decent on-screen chemistry, but their relationship isn't really all that great. The idea of Jane being mad at Thor for not coming to visit her while he was in New York, that's really forced. The man is trying to save the world from being destroyed, and you're getting on this man's case. And then later on in the movie, he questions who this other guy is that's calling you, and you have the nerve to put him down. Like, who the hell are you, woman? Like, who the hell are you? I mean, Jane comes across more as like a disgruntled ex-girlfriend than somebody with logic. And the whole thing of her trying to find out this thing and her whole story of having an Infinity Stone be sucked within inside of her, this thing called the Ether, which is revealed to be the Reality Stone. It's just a way to get her to Asgard, kind of contrived. But I do like how this movie spends more time on Asgard than on Earth, though in the climax it does contrive a way to end up going back to Earth for the final battle, which was really forced. But yeah, Natalie Portman, she was okay. I like the scene she has with Frigga. I like the scene she has with Odin. I like the little interactions she has with everyone on Asgard. And seeing her be a fish out of water, a la Thor in the first movie, was actually nice. It was nice to see a flip side to that. And again, I actually do like Natalie Portman as an actress in some things. Other things I think she'd be phoning it in. And this goes into the phoning it in category. It's like you can clearly tell that these type of movies are not in her wheelhouse, that she has no care for them at all, and she's just going through the motions just to get a paycheck, which is a shame because everyone around her is bringing their A game, and she's the weakest link. So like Natalie Portman, to me, mixed performances whenever I see her in tentpole movies, because you can clearly tell that she doesn't want to do it. If you don't like him, then don't take the money to do it, because you're being paid a lot of money to do these movies and you're phoning it in. Come on, you're better than that, Natalie. You're much better than that. In terms of and then you have Anthony Hopkins returning as Odin. I think Odin is a little bit more meaner in this movie. Then again, he has every right to be, since his son Loki nearly destroyed the world. So Odin has every right to really not want to show Loki any sympathy. But he and Thor have some nice scenes here and there, continuing the whole thing of Thor wanting to be a better man as opposed to being a good king, and still trying to find himself and stuff like that. I mean, Odin does have some good chances to shine. Like when Frigga's death happens, I love how just broken down Odin has become, to the point where he's willing to sacrifice every single Asgardian just to get revenge. Speaking of which, I do like the invasion of the Dark Elves going to Asgard and causing havoc. Like that was a cool action sequence that took place. But I'll get to my problems with the Dark Elves momentarily. Let me just finish rounding out everything. The supporting cast, you got Kat Dennings returns as Darcy. She's okay. Her sense of she's fine for what she was. Stellan Skarsgård, who returns once again in this movie. He was also in the Avengers under Loki's mind control, and in this movie's the fallout of that, where he's basically gone crazy after being under Loki's manipulation. And Skarsgård has a chance to show off his more comedic chops, so I like that a lot. So that was fun for what it was. The whole thing of a convergence happening, I think that whole plot is just completely convoluted, a little hard to follow. Like, this whole thing basically should have just been the Dark Elves wanting to get revenge on Asgard for the Asgardians banishing them. That should have been the focal point of the story, not this whole convergence things and the aligning of the realms, which makes this movie feel way more over the top than it really should be. It should have been a more simple, streamlined story that took place between the Dark World and Asgard, and going between those two places during the final battle, instead of once again finding a way to go back on Earth, which I can't stand. So speaking of the Dark Elves, let's talk about them. Christopher Eccleston plays the character of Malekith, and yes, everything that has been said about this character is true. Malekith is the worst MCU villain ever because he has no character. He has nothing. His motivations are bent solely on wanting to get revenge on Asgard, and that's pretty much it. Like, he has no other goal besides that, and he has no character quirk besides that. Like, we don't get to know who Malekith is, and what we do know is very basic, which is that he supposedly had a family they were all killed, but we never get into Malekith's head. We never see any of those moments as any moments. I never get the sense that things feel personal with Malekith. It's almost along the lines of he just wants to destroy things for the sake of destroying things. We don't get to know who he is as a villain or as a character. He's more or less a driving force that Thor has to stop. And that's the extent of Malekith in this movie. And that's a shame because Christopher Eccleston's a very good, very talented actor. And he's wasted in a role that just doesn't utilizes those talents. And you also have Adewale, I can't remember what his name is. He played Killer Croc in Suicide Squad, who plays a character called Curse and is the second in command to Malekith. He's also underutilized to the point where he's just a raising brute monster. So yeah, the villains in this movie really bring it down. Like, and what makes it worse is that the opening prologue, when Odin is discussing the feud between the Dark Elves and Asgard, it sounds interesting on paper, but the execution is just blah. And I think a lot of that has to go with Alan Taylor. And I think Alan Taylor, Alan Taylor to me was like kind of the problem on the first Thor movie. He's somebody who has experience in doing like these medieval type of things. Like Brana is very Shakespeare, while Alan Taylor has cut his teeth with Game of Thrones. So you would think that these directors would fit the aesthetic of Thor, but instead they try to make things more grounded and they don't exploit the more outlandish and colorful cosmic side of the character, and that brings it down a lot. And I think Alan Taylor, I just don't think he was a good fit for this movie at all. It feels like I'm watching there are certain moments where it feels like you're watching a made-for-TV movie, mainly because Alan Taylor is not really known for making feature-length movies. He's known for directing Game of Thrones, and the movie really has that HBO TV show feel to it, which kind of makes it feel just boring in a lot of areas. Not to say that this movie does not have some good cinematography in some areas, because it does. Like, I like the look of the Dark World. I like how it has this bleak, desolate, black, volcanic ash type of feel to it. So that looks cool. I like how Asgard feels more populated. It feels more lived in, more lively. So that's cool. Like, there are some aesthetics that Alan Taylor did that I did like. And if he had more refinement, this could have been a much better movie. But what we got is what we got. And what we got wasn't really all that interesting. Like I said, another thing that I didn't care for is that the Warriors 3, Thor's friends, they're underutilized in this movie. They're better utilized in that first Thor movie than in the second Thor movie. I mean, yeah, they have some chances to shine here and there, but Volstagg, Brave Stevenson, he doesn't have a whole lot to do. Sif doesn't really have a whole lot to do. Fendal has a couple of cool scenes here and there, replaced by Zachary Levi in this film. Hogan, he's in the beginning of the movie, then he just doesn't appear again, and then he just disappears afterwards. Like, the Warriors 3 continue to get shafted, and it's a shame because the actors who play these characters are very talented, and I would have liked to have seen them and Thor and Loki go to the Dark World and fight the elves instead of Thor doing it all by himself. No, I'd have liked to have seen Thor's little mini Avengers team help him fight. Instead, they don't do anything, which is a shame because the movies, the Thor movies set up this, and they don't do nothing with it. And it's annoying and it's boring. It's boring seeing Thor do everything by himself with no one to help him. It's like it really is like an type of thing. Yeah, the action sequences in this movie is very action heavy, and not all the action is really all that memorable. Like I said, maybe the two best ones to me are the Dark Elves attacking Asgard, in which Heimdall, played by Idris Elba, he actually has something to do because he actually, fights some of the Dark Elves for a little bit. Like that, the invasion of Asgard's cool, which leads to the death of Frigga. I like all that stuff. I like how Loki and Thor join forces to take down the Dark Elves, and I like how they created this whole deception thing of Loki faking a betrayal just to throw the Dark Elves off their scent. And of course, this leads to Loki's second fake out death. And I like how the movie ruined it by showing Loki more or less transform into an Asgardian guard. because when you get to the end of the movie, when it's revealed that Loki's been posing as Odin, it would have felt better if you never cut back to the Dark World after Loki's supposed death. It would have made the revelation that much better and that much more cooler. Instead, you just spoiled it, and I didn't like that at all. I didn't like it when I first saw this movie, and I don't like it now on a rewatch. I just don't like it. It's just so cheap, and it takes away the fun of it. However, I do like Loki transforming into Captain America, and we get a chance to see Chris Evans show off that sense of humor that he was known for before becoming Captain America, so that was cool. I like the whole running gag of the Warriors 3 threatening to kill Loki if he betrays Thor. That shit, that joke always has me laughing. The final fight scene, it is what it is. It's nothing really all that memorable, nothing all that spectacular. At the end of the day, Malekith gets transported back to his homeworld and is subsequently killed. And then this leads to Thor having a conversation with Odin. It's revealed that it's revealed that Loki is alive and was posing as Odin, which leads up to endless amounts of possibilities, which we see get expanded upon in Thor Ragnarok, which is the legitimate, really good Thor movie, which I'll be getting to soon. But yeah, in tones of the overall narrative, the only thing that Thor: The Dark World did was introduce the Ether / the Reality Stone and the post-credit scene, that sets up Guardians of the Galaxy with Volstagg and Sith giving the Ether to the Collector, played by Benicio del Toro. Of course, this scene sets up Nowhere and segues into Guardians of the Galaxy. And it's also cool that James Gunn was one who directed this post-credit scene. But that's basically the only two big takeaways you get from Thor: The Dark World. That and Loki's redemption, which I thought was handled very well, even though I think they messed it up towards the end by not keeping Loki's supposed death more of a mystery till you get to that final scene. But yeah, overall, Thor: The Dark World, it has its moments. It's not the worst MCU movie you'll ever see. It's at least a quick watch. It's at least entertaining. It does have some entertaining bits here and there. The stuff on Asgard is the strongest part, while the stuff on Earth with the whole convergence and Darcy and her intern studying it, that shit's boring. The forced love triangle with Richard, Jane, and Thor is just, why does it have to be there? So yeah, it's lopsided. Like the first Thor movie, it's a lopsided affair in which which is trying to focus on two different things, and overall you get a movie that just, it's just there. With only two major things happening, the rest of this movie is really forgettable. The villain is completely ridiculously bad, and yeah, that's it. At the end of the day, like I said, it's still entertaining. It's still a quality movie. Even though I don't think Alan Taylor was the right choice for this, it's still decently directed with some decent cinematography. And that's why I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10 for Thor: The Dark World. No different than its predecessor. It's pretty much the flip. The first Thor movie was more Earth-focused. This is more Asgardian-focused. But the same problems are still there. So yeah, 6.5 out of 10 for Thor: The Dark World. Let me know your choice. Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.